Good evening, and welcome back to Boring History for Sleep. Tonight, I invite you to set aside the noise of the present day and travel, slowly and gently, to the very edge of the ancient world. Imagine a long frontier stretching across misty rivers and dark forests. A thin line of wooden palisades and stone walls marking the boundary of a vast empire. Beyond it lies uncertainty. Behind it, the order of Rome. As you settle in, allow your breathing to become steady. There is no rush here. History will unfold at a calm and measured pace. The rhythm of marching boots, the creak of leather straps, the soft murmur of Latin spoken around a campfire. These will be our quiet companions tonight. We will begin not with emperors or grand triumphs, but with you. Or rather, with the version of you who has enlisted in the Roman army, and now finds yourself stationed far from home. Perhaps along the cold banks of the Rhine River, or in the damp hills of Britannia. You are not a hero from a marble statue. You are a common legionary, one of thousands. And as we gently explore the rhythm of your days, you may begin to understand why. You would not last a day. So let us begin. Imagine yourself waking before dawn. There is no gentle alarm, no soft mattress. Instead, you stir beneath a heavy woolen blanket inside a small leather tent. The air is cool and faintly damp. Outside, the sky is still dark, tinged only slightly with the pale suggestion of morning. Somewhere nearby, a fellow soldier coughs. Another adjusts his gear with the muted clink of metal. The scent in the tent is familiar now. Wool, oiled leather, faint wood smoke drifting in from last night's fire. Beneath it all lingers the earthy smell of trampled grass and mud. You have been here long enough that this mixture feels almost ordinary. Almost. A horn sounds in the distance. Low, steady, 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 almost ordinary, almost. A horn sounds in the distance. Low, steady, unemotional. It is time to rise. You sit up, already feeling the stiffness in your shoulders and legs. Yesterday's march was long, perhaps 20 Roman miles, and though your body has grown stronger over months of service, it has not grown immune to fatigue. Your feet are calloused, yes, but blisters still form beneath the straps of your sandals. The rhythm of your life is repetition, and repetition leaves its mark. Outside, the camp is beginning to stir. Rows upon rows of identical tents stretch in neat, disciplined lines. The Roman army prides itself on order. Even here, on the distant frontier, surrounded by forests that seem endless and rivers that flow into lands, Rome does not fully control. There is geometry, straight roads, straight ditches, straight ranks. You dress methodically. First the tunic, simple wool, belted at the waist. Then the armor, the larica segmentata, composed of overlapping iron plates, wraps around your torso. It is ingenious in design, flexible yet protective. It is also heavy. As you fasten it into place, you feel its weight settle onto your shoulders. Not crushing, but constant. You will carry this weight for hours. Your helmet, polished but dented from use, rests nearby. You run a cloth along its surface almost absent-mindedly. Equipment must be maintained. Rust is a quiet enemy. Neglect invites punishment. The shield, the scutum, waits outside. Tall, curved, painted in red and gold. It is large enough to shelter most of your body. It is also cumbersome, especially on long marches. Yet you carry it because discipline demands it. And discipline is the backbone of Rome. Breakfast is simple. A ration of coarse bread, perhaps dipped in watered wine. The bread is dense, sometimes hard at the edges. It fills the stomach without delighting it. There may be salted pork cut into small portions. Salt preserves it for long campaigns, but it leaves your mouth dry. You chew slowly. There is no conversation beyond a few murmured words. The day ahead requires energy, and energy requires quiet focus. Soon the drills begin. Even if no enemy is visible beyond the frontier, you train. You train because readiness is survival. Wooden practice swords feel heavier than real blades, designed that way to strengthen your arms. You strike wooden posts again and again, rehearsing movements until they become automatic. Forward thrust. Withdraw. Shield up. The rhythm repeats. Dust rises from the training ground. Sweat forms beneath your armor despite the cool air. Your breathing deepens, but you do not stop. A centurion walks between the ranks, vine staff in hand. He says little. He does not need to. His presence is enough. Punishments in the Roman army are firm and unambiguous. A missed formation, a dull blade, a moment of hesitation. Consequences follow swiftly. Sometimes extra duties, sometimes public reprimand. In rare and severe cases, collective punishment. The knowledge of this discipline hangs quietly over every action, and so you move in unison. When the drills conclude, your day is far from over. Contrary to popular imagination, a Roman legionary does not spend most of his time in battle. Battle is rare, intense, and often brief. The greater portion of your life is construction. You build roads, you dig ditches, you raise walls. The Roman frontier, whether along the Rhine, the Danube, or the edges of Britannia, is a living line of fortifications. Timber palisades must be repaired, watchtowers reinforced, camps rebuilt whenever the legion relocates. You lift heavy stones. You carry timber beams. Your hands grow rough and strong. Under your fingernails, dirt collects and lingers. Even when you wash in the river, the sense of soil remains. Imagine yourself digging a defensive ditch beneath a grey sky. The earth is heavy from recent rain. Each shovel of soil clings stubbornly to the blade. Around you, hundreds of men perform the same motion. There is little conversation, only the sound of iron striking earth, the steady rhythm of labor. This is empire building at its most practical. At midday, you pause briefly to eat again. More bread. Perhaps some lentils if supplies allow. Water, sometimes tinged with the faint taste of the wooden barrel in which it travelled. You sit on the ground. Your back aches. Your shoulders throb from the weight of armor removed only temporarily. And yet there is pride. You are part of something vast. The Roman Empire stretches across continents. Roads connect cities you will never see. Coins stamped with the emperor's profile circulate from Spain to Syria. And here you are, one small figure in that immense system. Still, pride does not soften the cold at night. When posted along the northern frontiers, the climate can be unforgiving. In Britannia, rain falls in long persistent sheets. The soil becomes mud beneath your sandals. Cloaks grow damp and heavy. Fires sputter under the moisture. In winter, frost forms along the edges of the camp. Breath clouds the morning air. Your fingers stiffen as you lace your boots. Metal armor feels especially cold against the skin. You grow accustomed to discomfort, but you never entirely welcome it. Sanitation is another quiet reality. The Roman army is advanced in many ways. Camps are laid out with drainage systems. Latrines are positioned at measured distances. Waste is managed more systematically than in many civilian settlements. And yet, disease is never far away. Hundreds of men living in close quarters create conditions where illness can spread. A cough in one tent may become many coughs within days. Minor infections, left untreated, can worsen. The army has medics skilled for their time, but knowledge is limited. Recovery depends as much on resilience as on treatment. You observe all of this with a kind of steady acceptance. It is simply the rhythm of your life. Occasionally, there is the tension of patrol. You march beyond the walls in formation, shields aligned. The forest ahead is quiet, perhaps too quiet. You scan the tree line, listening for movement. The tribes beyond the frontier know this land well. They do not fight in rigid formations. They move swiftly, striking when opportunity presents itself. Sometimes nothing happens. Sometimes there is a sudden burst of shouting, a brief clash, then stillness again. The aftermath of battle is not glorious. It is quiet and sobering. Fallen comrades are carried back. Equipment is gathered. Names are recorded. The army moves forward. Always forward. At night, when duties conclude, you sit near the campfire. The flames flicker softly, casting warm light against the dark perimeter of the camp. Conversations are low. Stories from home emerge. Vineyards in Italy, olive groves in Hispania, bustling markets in Gaul. You picture them in your mind. Homesickness settles in gently, like a persistent ache. You enlisted for many reasons. Perhaps for steady pay, perhaps for the promise of land upon discharge, perhaps because options were limited. Whatever the reason, the frontier now defines your existence. Years may pass before you return home. Some never do. The empire demands endurance, and so you endure. You wake before dawn. You drill, you build, you march, you eat coarse bread, you repair your armor. You stand watch beneath unfamiliar stars. The cycle repeats with calm inevitability. If you imagine yourself there long enough, feeling the weight of armor on your shoulders, the damp chill in the air, the steady discipline pressing upon every hour, you may begin to understand. It is not a single dramatic hardship that would defeat you. It is the accumulation, the constant weight, the endless repetition, the distance from home. And yet for Rome, this quiet, disciplined endurance is what holds the world together. As the fire burns low and the camp settles into uneasy rest, you lie back on your simple bedding. Beyond the walls, the forest whispers in the wind. Somewhere far away, senators debate policy in marble halls. Emperors issue decrees. But here, on the frontier, history is built one measured step at a time. And in the steady rhythm of those steps, the empire persists. As you rest within the quiet order of the frontier camp, beneath a sky scattered with distant stars, it is easy to forget that the life you lead, the drills, the marches, the building of roads and walls is shaped by decisions made far away. In Rome, the heart of the empire beats to a different rhythm. Let us leave the cold edges of the Rhine for a moment and drift southward, across mountains and plains, toward the warm Mediterranean air, toward marble temples and crowded forums, toward ambition wrapped in white togas. Here, many years before you took your oath as a legionary, a young aristocrat named Julius Caesar was quietly navigating the dangerous currents of Roman politics. He was not born into poverty. His family, the Iuli, claimed ancient lineage. But by the time of his youth, they were respectable rather than dominant. In Rome, lineage alone was not enough. Influence required alliances, visibility, and above all patience. Imagine Rome in the 1st century BCE, not the serene empire of later centuries, but a restless republic. Senators debate loudly beneath painted ceilings. Elections are fiercely contested. Rival factions form and dissolve like shifting sand. Caesar entered this world not with overwhelming wealth, but with determination. As a young man, he aligned himself with the populares, a political faction that claimed to represent the interests of the common people. This was not an act of rebellion, but a calculated choice. Rome's lower classes held power through numbers, and popular support could propel a career. Yet ambition is expensive. Public games, feasts, political campaigns, these required vast sums of money. Caesar borrowed heavily. Debts followed him like shadows. It was said that at one point he owed so much that creditors monitored his movements closely. But debt in Rome could be a tool. It created urgency. It demanded bold action, and bold action would define his life. To secure both glory and wealth, Caesar sought military command. Eventually, he was appointed governor of provinces in Gaul, a region that roughly corresponds to modern France, and parts of Belgium and Germany. For you, the legionary on the frontier, Gaul is familiar territory. But when Caesar arrived, it was not yet fully subdued. Tribal confederations shifted alliances. Leaders rose and fell. Rome's control was partial and contested. Over the next several years, Caesar conducted a series of campaigns that would become known collectively as the Gallic Wars. Imagine the legions advancing through dense forests and across wide rivers, temporary bridges rising swiftly under disciplined hands, camps constructed each night with geometric precision. The same routines you experience on the frontier, the digging, the drilling, the marching, were refined and perfected during these campaigns. Caesar understood the importance of logistics. Armies do not move on courage alone. They require grain, tools, pack animals, and careful coordination. He ensured that supply lines were maintained, that fortifications were built, that soldiers were rewarded when possible. He also understood the power of narrative. Throughout his campaigns, he wrote detailed accounts of his victories. These writings, composed in clear and direct prose, were sent back to Rome. They presented his actions as necessary, measured, and successful. The Roman public read of distant battles as if they were orderly and justified expansions of security. The reality, as always, was more complex. War in Gaul was not a simple march forward. There were sieges that lasted months. There were rebellions that flared unexpectedly. There were moments when Roman forces were pushed to their limits. One of the most significant challenges came from a Gallic leader named Vercingetorix, who united several tribes in resistance. The conflict culminated in the siege of Alesia, where Roman engineering skill was tested to its fullest extent. Caesar's forces constructed elaborate fortifications, not only surrounding the besieged city, but also building an outer ring to defend against relief armies. It was an astonishing feat of organization. When victory finally came, it was decisive. For the soldiers, it meant survival and spoils. For Caesar, it meant prestige beyond measure. By the end of the Gallic Wars, he had expanded Rome's territory significantly. He had also cultivated deep loyalty among his troops. They had marched with him for years. They had shared hardships, cold nights, meager rations, and the steady rhythm of camp life. Much like you, this loyalty would soon become critical. Back in Rome, political tensions simmered. Caesar had formed an informal alliance, often called the First Triumvirate, with Pompey, a respected general, and Crassus, a wealthy magnate. Together they balanced each other's power. But alliances in Rome were rarely permanent. Crassus died during a campaign in the east. Pompey's relationship with Caesar grew strained. The Senate, wary of Caesar's growing influence, ordered him to relinquish his command and return to Rome as a private citizen. To do so would mean vulnerability. Without the legal protections of office, he could face prosecution from political enemies. His career, and perhaps his safety, hung in the balance. In 49 BCE, standing on the northern border of Italy, Caesar made a decision that would alter the course of Roman history. He crossed the Rubicon River. It was a small river, modest, unremarkable in appearance, but symbolically it marked the boundary beyond which a general was forbidden to bring his army. To cross it with troops was an act of open defiance. Imagine the quiet tension of that moment. The soldiers waiting for orders. The river flowing steadily past. And then the march forward. With that step, civil war began. Caesar's forces advanced swiftly through Italy. Pompey retreated, gathering support in the eastern provinces. The conflict unfolded across the Mediterranean world. In Greece, in Egypt, in North Africa. The battles were decisive but not endless. Caesar's experience, his disciplined legions, and perhaps a measure of fortune carried him through. Pompey was ultimately defeated and later killed in Egypt. Rome, weary of conflict, stood under the shadow of one dominant figure. Caesar returned not as a mere general, but as dictator. The title in the Roman Republic was traditionally temporary, granted during emergencies. But Caesar's position grew increasingly permanent. He implemented reforms, adjusting the calendar, restructuring debt, expanding citizenship. He centralized authority. Some saw stability. Others saw the end of republican liberty. In the Senate, unease deepened. On the Ides of March 44 BCE, Caesar entered the theatre of Pompey for a Senate meeting. The setting was familiar. The marble columns, the echo of footsteps on stone floors. Perhaps he sensed tension. Perhaps he believed his position secure. A group of senators approached him. What followed was swift and shocking. In a flurry of motion, blades were drawn. Caesar fell beneath repeated strikes. The chamber that had so often resounded with debate fell into stunned silence. The assassination did not restore the Republic as the conspirators had hoped. Instead, it ushered in further turmoil. Power struggles resumed. Alliances formed and fractured once more. Eventually, Caesar's adopted heir, Octavian, later known as Augustus, would emerge victorious, transforming Rome from republic to empire. And so, as you lie on your simple bedding along the frontier, consider this: the armor you wear, the roads you build, the frontier you defend. All of it is shaped by decisions made decades earlier by men in distant marble halls. Caesar sought glory, security, and legacy. His ambition expanded Rome's borders and altered its political structure. But for the ordinary legionary, for someone like you, the consequences were practical. More territory to defend, longer frontiers, years spent far from home. History often remembers the names of leaders. It carves them into stone. It preserves their likeness in busts and coins. But it is the steady march of countless unnamed soldiers that carries their visions into reality. As the night deepens and the camp grows quiet once more, you may sense the subtle connection between the individual and the vast machinery of empire. Between one decision at a riverbank and thousands of men standing watch beneath foreign skies. Let us remain for a moment on the frontier. The fire has burned low. The watch has changed. A thin mist drifts between the trees beyond the palisade. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl calls soft, distant, almost thoughtful. You were stationed along the Rhine, perhaps, or in a fort deeper within Germania. The empire feels solid, permanent. Roads stretch behind you in straight, reassuring lines. Orders arrive with official seals. Pay is distributed with careful accounting. Rome appears uncheckable, and yet, only a few decades before your posting, something happened in these forests that quietly unsettled that confidence. It is known today as the disaster of the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest. To understand it, imagine yourself not in a fortified camp, but on the march. It is the year 09 CE. 3 Roman legions, along with auxiliaries and camp followers, are moving through unfamiliar territory. The land is dense with trees, tall oaks and pines rising overhead. The path beneath your sandals is narrow, softened by recent rain. The air is heavy with the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. The commander of this force is Publius Quinctilius Varus, a Roman governor tasked with consolidating imperial control in Germania. The tribes here have been, at least outwardly, cooperative. Rome believes the region is on the verge of becoming a formal province. You march in long columns, not in tight battle formation. Wagons creak along the muddy track. Soldiers carry full packs. The rhythm is steady, unhurried. But this land is not like Gaul. The forests close in. Visibility is limited. The sky disappears behind a canopy of branches. Sound carries strangely. The snap of a twig, the distant rustle of movement. Among the Germanic auxiliaries attached to the Roman force is a man named Arminius, educated in Roman ways, granted citizenship, trusted. He has been quietly organizing resistance. The ambush begins not with a grand signal, but with confusion. Missiles emerge from the trees, javelins, stones, arrows. The column, stretched thin along a narrow path, struggles to form cohesive ranks. The terrain works against Roman discipline. Shields are raised, orders are shouted, but mud pulls at sandals. Wagons clog the route. Communication falters. Rain begins to fall. It turns the ground slick. It dampens bowstrings. It weighs down cloaks and armor. The forest, which might have seemed merely inconvenient before, now feels oppressive. For 3 days, the Roman force attempts to regroup, to break free, to restore order. But the attacks continue in waves. The enemy does not present itself in neat formations. It strikes from cover, then fades back into the trees. The Roman army is trained for set-piece battles, open fields, visible opponents, coordinated maneuvers. Here in the Teutoburg Forest, those strengths are blunted. Eventually, the legions are overwhelmed. Varus, facing defeat, chooses to end his own life rather than be captured. Many officers do the same. Thousands of soldiers fall. The aftermath is not described in detail in our calm telling, but it was devastating. Standards, the sacred eagles of the legions, were lost. For Rome, this was more than a military setback. It was a shock. 3 legions minus 17, 18, and 19, effectively erased. Their numbers would never be used again. It was as though the forest itself had swallowed them. In Rome, the reaction was profound. The Emperor Augustus, upon hearing the news, is said to have wandered his palace in distress, murmuring, "Varus, give me back my legions." Whether those exact words were spoken or not, the sentiment captures the mood. Until that moment, expansion into Germania had seemed achievable, inevitable even. After Teutoburg, the tone shifted. Campaigns would continue, yes. Retribution would be sought. But the dream of fully incorporating the deep forests east of the Rhine began to fade. Instead, the Rhine became a boundary, a line, a frontier, the very kind of frontier where you now stand watch. For centuries, the precise location of the battle remained uncertain. Ancient writers such as Tacitus described the general events, but the exact site was debated. Then, in the late 20th century, archaeological discoveries near Kalkreis in modern Germany began to offer answers. Coins bearing Varus's stamp, fragments of Roman armor, sling bullets, the remains of defensive earthworks hastily constructed and then abandoned. Personal items scattered across what must once have been a chaotic landscape. Archaeologists worked patiently, brushing soil from corroded metal. Each object was small, a buckle, a helmet fragment, a piece of chainmail, individually unremarkable. Together, they told a quiet story, the story of an army caught in terrain it did not fully understand. The forest had preserved these traces in its own way, not intact and pristine, but layered beneath centuries of leaves and soil. As each artifact emerged, it narrowed the field of speculation. It anchored the ancient accounts to a real place, beneath real trees. When you imagine yourself walking through that forest today, you might not notice anything extraordinary at first glance. The ground is uneven. Birds move through branches. Wind sighs gently. But beneath your feet lie the echoes of marching boots that never returned home. The significance of Teutoburg is not simply that Rome lost a battle. Rome lost battles before and would lose them again. What made this different was its psychological weight. It demonstrated that there were limits, that disciplined formations and superior engineering could falter against unfamiliar terrain and adaptive resistance. For soldiers stationed along the frontier after this event, the memory lingered. Perhaps you have heard older veterans speak of it in quiet tones around the fire, not as a dramatic tale, but as a caution. Respect the forest. Respect the unknown. Do not assume inevitability. In the years following the disaster, Rome launched punitive expeditions into Germania. Commanders like Germanicus sought to recover lost standards and restore honor. Some successes were achieved, but permanent conquest beyond the Rhine never fully materialized. Instead, fortifications were strengthened. Camps were standardized. Supply lines were reinforced. The frontier became less a stepping stone for expansion and more a boundary to defend. And so your daily routine, the drills, the ditch digging, the watch rotations, is shaped in part by this long-ago ambush. The empire learned. It adapted. It chose stability over endless advance. As you stand watch in the dim hours before dawn, shield resting against your leg, you might look out at the shadowed tree line and feel a quiet awareness. Beyond that darkness lies land Rome does not control. And that is acceptable. The empire, vast as it is, cannot stretch infinitely. Even Rome must recognize the contours of geography and resistance. The forest remains. The Rhine flows steadily, marking a natural divide. And you, one soldier among thousands, embody that boundary, not pushing it endlessly forward, but holding it in patient endurance. In this way, Teutoburg becomes not just a story of loss, but a story of restraint, a turning point where ambition met reality, and the empire chose consolidation over unchecked expansion. The lesson settles gently, like mist between trees. Empires rise. They test their limits. They learn where the earth itself resists them. And then, often quietly, they adjust. Now, let us leave the frontier behind. Allow the forest to fade. The damp leather tent dissolves into memory. The steady drip of rain from wooden palisades grows distant. Instead, imagine warm sunlight spilling across rolling hills in central Italy. Cypress trees stand tall against a pale blue sky. Olive groves shimmer softly in a mild breeze. Here, far from the mud of the Rhine or the chill of Britannia, stands a Roman senator's villa. You approach along a carefully laid stone path. The gravel crunches faintly beneath sandals. The air smells of herbs and dry earth, warmed by the Mediterranean sun. The building itself is expansive but balanced. Low, rectangular, with red-tiled roofs and whitewashed walls that reflect the light. Inside, the temperature changes. Marble floors feel cool beneath your feet. Intricate mosaics depict scenes of gods, sea creatures, or pastoral landscapes. The patterns are precise, deliberate, meant to be admired slowly. Water flows quietly in a central courtyard fountain. The sound is soft and continuous, a gentle counterpoint to the silence of wealth. Here, the rhythm of life is very different. The senator does not wake to a horn before dawn. He rises gradually, attended by slaves who manage his household. A light breakfast is prepared. Fresh bread, figs, perhaps honey and cheese. The food is not coarse and salted for preservation. It is selected for pleasure and refinement. He dresses in fine linen or wool, carefully arranged into a toga when required for public appearance. The fabric is lighter than your armor. It drapes rather than presses. It signals status without weight. Slaves move quietly through the halls. Some oversee the kitchens. Others maintain gardens, trim hedges into neat shapes, or harvest olives. Still others handle correspondence, reading letters aloud or drafting replies at dictation. The estate is not merely a home. It is an administrative center, a symbol of prestige, and a carefully managed enterprise. The senator may spend part of his day reviewing accounts from distant properties, grain shipments, vineyard yields, rental incomes from urban apartments in Rome. Wealth flows through ledgers, measured in neat columns of numbers. Occasionally, he travels into the city itself. Rome, unlike the frontier camp, is dense and bustling. The forum hums with activity, advocates speaking in measured tones, merchants negotiating prices, citizens debating news from across the empire. The senator walks these marble spaces as a participant in governance. He discusses taxation policies, provincial appointments, military funding. Perhaps he speaks of frontier defenses, of the Rhine, the Danube, Britannia. Perhaps he debates the allocation of funds for fortifications, for roads, for additional troops. He does so while standing on polished stone floors, beneath shaded porticos. Meanwhile, you stand watch beneath grey skies. In the afternoon, the senator might retire to his baths. Roman bath culture is not hurried. It unfolds in stages. First the warm room, the tepidarium, where conversation flows gently. Then the hotter caldarium, where steam softens muscles and opens pores. Finally, the cool plunge of the frigidarium, refreshing and controlled. Water is heated through sophisticated hypocaust systems, channels beneath the floors that circulate warmth. It is engineering of a different kind from frontier walls, but engineering nonetheless. After bathing, there may be reading. A slave recites poetry from Virgil or Horace. Philosophical works are discussed. Stoic reflections on virtue, Epicurean musings on pleasure. The senator listens, occasionally offering commentary. In the evening, guests arrive for a banquet. Couches are arranged in a triclinium. Guests recline comfortably as courses are served. Dishes might include roasted meats, fresh seafood, seasoned vegetables, and imported spices from distant provinces. Perhaps even from lands reached through conquests initiated generations earlier. Wine flows, diluted with water in careful proportions. Conversation drifts from politics to literature, to rumors of distant campaigns. Somewhere in those conversations, the frontier exists only as an abstract concept, a line on a map, a necessary expense. It is not damp wool against skin. It is not the weight of armor at dawn. It is not the steady ache of homesickness. And yet, the villa and the frontier are inseparable. The comfort of the senator rests upon the endurance of the legionary. The marble floors are possible because roads are maintained. The olive groves remain secure because borders are held. The bathhouses stay warm because provinces send revenue. In this way, the empire functions like a vast, intricate machine. Each part relies upon the others. And so, while the senator reclines beneath painted ceilings, you tighten the straps of your armor beneath a cloudy sky. While poetry is recited beside a warm bath, you adjust your shield beneath a watchtower's shadow. Neither existence is entirely free of burden. The senator navigates rivalries and expectations within the Senate. He must maintain alliances, guard his reputation, respond to shifting political currents, A careless word in Rome can be as dangerous, in its own way, as a careless step in the forest. But the texture of daily life remains starkly different. For you, the rhythm is physical. March, dig, drill, stand watch. For him, the rhythm is social. Debate, negotiate, host, persuade. And as night falls over Italy, lanterns cast golden light across villa walls. The air cools gently. Cicadas hum in distant fields. At the frontier, night falls more abruptly. Torches flicker against wooden ramparts. The forest beyond remains dark and unknowable. The same stars shine overhead, yet they feel farther away. In both places, men lie down to sleep, one on a cushioned couch, beneath frescoed ceilings, another on a simple cot wrapped in wool, listening to the wind beyond the walls. The empire holds them both within its wide embrace. As our journey draws to a close, allow the images to soften. The frontier camp grows still. The senator's villa dims as lamps are extinguished. Roads stretch quietly between them, long ribbons of stone connecting distant worlds. You have marched with the legionary before dawn, felt the steady weight of armor, dug ditches in cold earth, shared coarse bread beside a modest fire. You have observed the ambition of Julius Caesar, how a single decision at the Rubicon rippled outward, shaping lives far beyond Rome's marble halls. You have wandered through the shadowed trees of the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest, where ambition met resistance and the empire quietly learned its limits. And you have stepped into the calm elegance of a senator's villa, where warm baths and poetry stood in silent contrast to mud and discipline. Through it all, one theme remains steady. Empire is not built solely on dramatic victories or famous names. It rests upon repetition, upon endurance, upon the daily routines of countless individuals whose names history does not preserve. The legionary rises before dawn. The senator reviews his accounts. The river flows. The forest stands. The rhythm continues. And now, as you rest in the comfort of your own present moment, perhaps beneath a soft blanket, in a quiet room far removed from ancient frontiers, you may notice the contrast. No armor presses on your shoulders. No horn calls you to drill at sunrise. The empire of Rome exists only in memory, in ruins softened by time. The walls have weathered. The roads remain in fragments. The forest still grows where legions once marched. History, once immediate and demanding, has become distant and gentle. Let your thoughts drift like that steady river along the frontier. Slow, unhurried, carrying fragments of the past with quiet persistence. The camp settles. The villa darkens. The stars remain. And somewhere, in the vast sweep of time, the steady march grows faint, softer, more distant still. Thank you for joining me tonight on Boring History for Sleep. Rest well.